got a bit more to do on this Bugatti, which is clearly in half. We did the impossible. But now it's gonna get a lot harder because everything from now on is building the car and fixing it. How we're gonna fix the bracket between the engine and the gearbox, which is the whole reason why this car is in half.
Every build like this needs a villain, and Bugatti wrote itself into the role early. When this $6 million Chiron came in crash damaged, the manufacturer refused to sell a single replacement part. No support, no blueprint at all. So Mat Armstrong and his team tore the car in half themselves and fixed a gearbox Bugatti called unfixable outside a handful of facilities on the planet.
Bugatti didn't think that we were going to be able to separate this car in half.
Can't do that in a garage. There's just a few places in the world with the right equipment.
From there came a mystery wide-body kit flown in from Dubai, a cut straight into a genuine quarter panel, and a headlight hunt that ended with a private jet and a source who couldn't be named on camera. Let's discuss how it all came together. Bugatti said it couldn't be fixed. Every rebuild needs a villain, and this one came built in. When Bugatti decided early on that it wasn't going to sell replacement parts for this particular Chiron, the reasoning offered was simple and final. The manufacturer didn't believe it was safe to support the rebuild. No negotiation, no workaround offered. Just a closed door on one of the rarest, most expensive vehicles on the road, left to a small independent team, with no factory backing and no official blueprint to follow. What does a team do when the company that built the car refuses to help finish it? They improvise, and they make almost everything themselves. That single sentence carries more weight than it sounds like at first. This isn't a car with an aftermarket parts network sitting behind it, ready to fill gaps. Every panel, every bracket, every fix from this point forward would have to be built, sourced, or reverse-engineered from scratch, with zero margin for a manufacturer stepping in to correct a mistake. Does a refusal like that end a project, or does it just change who gets credit when the project actually works? The first real test of that came with the gearbox. To reach and repair the mounts, the team tore the car in half entirely, a decision that on its own would end most independent rebuilds before they started. Mat Armstrong led that repair alongside mechanic Liam, working through the kind of structural disassembly that most workshops simply don't attempt on a car worth this much money. They fixed the mounts, put the car back together, and drove it again, successfully, for the first time since the accident. According to the account given at the time, this was work Bugatti didn't believe was even possible outside of a tiny handful of facilities in the world equipped to handle it, and a similarly small number of people qualified to do it. A small garage team had just done exactly that. Is there a more direct way to answer a manufacturer's refusal than driving the car they said couldn't be fixed? Probably not. But the celebration didn't last long, because the gearbox was never the hardest part of this build. The body was. To finish the car, the team still needed body panels and headlights, and making either of those from nothing was, in Mat's own estimation, going to be seriously difficult. Would the same improvisation that fixed a gearbox Bugatti called unfixable be enough to solve a problem this much bigger? The refusal that started this entire saga.
It's going to get a lot harder, especially without Bugatti's help.
But we just don't think it's safe, and that's why we can't support it.
Was about to be tested again, on a much larger scale. Every part of this project up to this point had been reactive, responding to whatever Bugatti had refused to provide, one obstacle at a time. The body panels marked the first stage where the team had to be proactive instead, sourcing an entire solution before the problem even fully revealed itself. That shift in approach, from patching failures to planning ahead, is what set the next phase of the build apart from everything that came before it. How much harder does a rebuild get once reacting to problems isn't enough anymore, and the team has to start anticipating them instead? The mystery from Dubai. Weeks of waiting ended with a phone call and a fast shipment. Neither Matt nor Alex knew exactly what was inside the box that had just arrived. They had put their trust entirely in Venom, a Dubai-based body kit specialist known for building aggressive custom kits for exotic cars, and asked for speed above everything else. What came back wasn't just fast. It came by way of a shipping arrangement quick enough that the team joked it outpaced parts they'd waited on for a simple fuel control module traveling between France and the United Kingdom. Why trust a company you've never built with before, sight unseen, on a car this valuable? Because the original plan was modest. Standard replacement body panels, built to original specification, just enough to get the Chiron back to stock appearance. But a crash-damaged, one-of-one car creates its own opportunity. Since there was no way to buy factory-original panels anyway, the team and Venom agreed to go further than a simple replacement. They asked for something aerodynamic, something fast, something that had never been done on this platform before. And Venom delivered a wide-body kit nobody had ever attempted on a Chiron. The box, once finally opened, held pieces far more aggressive than anything factory standard. A wide-body front end, rear arch extensions, designed to flare the car's silhouette by roughly 30 millimeters on each side. Panels clearly built for drama rather than subtlety. The reaction in the workshop was somewhere between disbelief and excitement. Nobody had seen anything like it fitted to this specific chassis before, and there was a real, honest uncertainty about whether all of it would even physically fit. What do you do when the parts you ordered turn out more extreme than anything you actually pictured? Before any of the larger panels came out of the crate, the team paused to inspect the smaller pieces first. Brackets, trim sections, and hardware that would eventually tie the whole kit together. Each piece looked more purpose-built than the last, clearly designed by people who understood exotic car fabrication at a serious level rather than a generic aftermarket shop working from rough measurements. That level of detail bought some confidence heading into the fitment stage, even with the uncertainty still hanging over whether a kit built around the wrong reference chassis would actually cooperate once real cutting and drilling began. That uncertainty mattered.
Bob's making out of cardboard a little infills in the casting to give it some more structural rigidity. So first cutting this out of cardboard, then laying it in the gap.
Because Venom had built the kit using a standard Chiron as its reference platform, not the wider, more aggressive per-sport variant sitting in the workshop. Would a kit designed around the wrong base car actually line up once real metal met real metal? Only one part of the kit could answer that question quickly: the carbon fiber side skirt, standard to the per-sport, which needed to go on first before anything else in the kit could even be test-fitted. That question would define almost everything that happened next, starting with a decision nobody wanted to make: cutting into a car that, for the first time since the accident, was actually running and driving correctly again. The cut that couldn't be undone. Before any bodywork could begin, the electronics needed to be flawless. The car was carrying 3 separate fault codes: airbag, engine, and EPC. And while 2 of them turned out to be minor, caused by a low battery triggering passive misfire codes that cleared on their own, the airbag light was a different story entirely. Should a genuinely dangerous safety system fault ever be treated as a minor inconvenience on a car this powerful? It couldn't be, and the team knew it. which is exactly why this particular fault got more attention than almost anything else in the entire build. It was the same stubborn fault that had defeated the team once before, traced eventually to a battery interruption fuse, with resistance readings that refused to fall in line no matter what got replaced. The eventual fix came down to a single piece of orange plastic. A locking tab on the fuse itself, sourced originally from an unrelated Mercedes Vito van fuse costing about 15 currency units, turned out to be the actual point of failure. Not the fuse's core components, but two small prongs on that tab that had snapped off and were letting internal contacts touch when they shouldn't. Swap the tab, and the fault cleared instantly. How many hours, and how many failed replacement parts does it take to find a 15-unit piece of plastic as the real problem underneath a much more expensive fault code? For this build, the answer was measured in weeks. That search had already sent Matt and mechanic Toby driving across Miami earlier in the project, hunting down power fuses from multiple suppliers, none of which turned out to matter in the end. The actual solution had been sitting in an unrelated van parked the entire time, and nobody on the team had thought to look there until nearly every other option had already been exhausted. Does it feel like a win or a frustration when the correct fix was always this simple, hiding in plain sight the whole time? For a team that had already spent this much money chasing a fault this stubborn, it landed as a bit of both. With a faultless dashboard finally achieved, the real cutting could begin. Fitting the wide-body kit meant starting with the rear quarter panel, the same panel that had already been removed once to split the car for the gearbox repair, now wet-sanded and ready, but still needing a hole cut directly into it so the new arch extension could sit flush. Cutting into a perfectly functional panel on a car this rare is not a small decision, and the team treated it that way, hesitating before committing the first blade to metal. Once the cut was made, the arch extension could finally sit properly against the quarter. But fitting it meant drilling new mounting holes with zero room for error, since a mistake there would mean sourcing an entirely new quarter panel that, as established from the very beginning, Bugatti was not going to sell. Bolts went in from behind.
I'm thinking a Bugatti not going to sell us parts for it, but they might actually sell us parts, because there's no reason or no excuse on why they shouldn't sell us parts.
Side skirt extensions were built up separately, bonded and drilled into the original carbon fiber, then hung back onto the car one side at a time. Watching the wide-body silhouette take shape for the first time, was there any doubt left about whether the gamble had been worth it? For the team standing in that workshop, watching the wheels suddenly look small underneath a much wider arch, the answer was already becoming obvious. Drilling directly into genuine Bugatti carbon fiber is not a step anyone on the team treated casually, even after doing it once successfully. Each hole had to be marked, checked, and rechecked before the drill ever touched the panel, because there was no supply chain standing by to replace a mistake. Once the first side was done, the same process repeated on the opposite panel, and by the end, both sides were bolted up and hung back onto the car together for the first real look at the completed rear end. Does repeating a nerve-wracking process a second time make it easier? Or does knowing exactly how much is riding on it make the second cut just as tense as the first? The front end came with its own separate complication. Venom's replacement wing had been built to fit a standard Chiron's mounting bracket, not the Per Sport variant on this specific car, meaning the new, wider wing didn't line up with the existing hardware at all. Would an entire six-figure wing assembly simply be unusable over a mismatched bracket, after everything else had already gone right? The team tested this early, fitting the standard wing plate underneath the new wing simply to see whether the two would align. They didn't. The fix meant transferring the standard mounting bracket onto the new wing, and having a specialist fabricate recesses so the two mismatched parts could finally sit together the way factory components would have, had any of this ever come from a factory to begin with. With the rear quarter, side skirts, and engine cover all test-fitted, the true shape of the car was finally becoming visible for the first time since the accident. Panel gaps still needed adjusting, particularly around a badly bent bonnet hinge that had survived the crash in poor condition and couldn't simply be replaced with an off-the-shelf part. Small screw adjustments, checked and rechecked from multiple angles, slowly closed the gaps down to something close to factory tolerance. Proof that even with a manufacturer refusing to help, precision was still possible if the team was willing to spend the time. Setting the finished front end next to the original, undamaged panel it was replacing made the scale of the transformation impossible to miss. The new nose sat visibly wider, more aggressive, and unmistakably different from anything Bugatti had ever put into production. A deliberate choice, made once it became clear that a copy could never fully match the original anyway. If a replica was never going to be as good as the factory piece it replaced, why not make it better instead? Wider, faster looking, and entirely its own thing. That question, more than any single technical decision, ended up defining the entire direction of this rebuild. The most expensive headlights in the world. No amount of bodywork mattered if the car couldn't see the road. Both original headlights had taken damage in the accident, and despite still technically functioning, repairing them internally proved harder than expected. The alternative was buying new ones, and that's where the real number problem started. Some listings for replacement Chiron headlights ran as high as $150,000 for the pair.
Without being able to buy parts to repair this Bugatti, it seemed like an impossible rebuild. And on top of that, even if we were able to buy parts, they were just extortionate.
Headlights for a Chiron, €150,000.
Bugatti's own quoted price, by comparison, was $25,000 per headlight, $50,000 for the full front lighting system. Still an enormous number for two pieces of plastic and glass, however precisely engineered. Even Bugatti's own side of the Rimac partnership weighed in on the pricing when the team reached out directly, framing the cost as reasonable given the engineering involved, rather than excessive. Reasonable or not, $50,000 for a pair of headlights was never going to fit inside a building already operating on improvised parts and refused factory support. Every other avenue had to be explored first, no matter how unconventional it turned out to be. Is there a version of this story where the team simply pays Bugatti's asking price and moves on? Not for an independent build already operating without factory support. Alibaba listings surfaced during the search, offering suspiciously discounted units with no way to verify their authenticity or condition. Eventually, someone from a country in Europe reached out directly, offering a different path entirely, one that involved no paperwork trail, no public listing, and a contact who couldn't be filmed or named on camera. What followed looked less like a parts pickup and more like a covert operation. The team boarded a private jet for a tight window, landing, meeting the contact, securing the headlights, and returning to the airport within roughly 1 hour before the flight would leave without them. There was no time for delays, and no guarantee the parts would even be genuine once they arrived. How many rare parts hunts for a $6 million car end with a strict 1-hour deadline and a source who refuses to appear on camera? This one did, and there was no backup plan if the meeting fell through. When the exchange finally happened, both headlights were confirmed intact, undamaged, and authentic. For a price of roughly €10,000 total, a fraction of what either the open market or Bugatti itself had quoted. Getting real Bugatti Chiron headlights home, across borders, back to the United Kingdom, and eventually to the workshop in Miami, without a single crack or scratch, is not something every parts run manages to pull off. Every leg of that journey carried its own quiet risk. A dropped bag, a rough landing, a careless baggage handler could have ended the entire mission after the hardest part was already done. Fitting them raised its own immediate concern. Would coding or electronic pairing be required? The kind of manufacturer-locked process that had already caused problems earlier in this build. A quick bench test answered that question. The headlights powered on cleanly. No coding required. No electronic wall to climb. The outer lighting elements worked immediately. The daytime running lights did not. Did the team just get lucky twice in one part's run, or was there a reason genuine components slotted in this easily, where aftermarket ones never had? The final problems. Nobody expected. A car this close to finished still had two problems left, and neither one had an obvious answer. The daytime running lights, the exact detail that gives the Chiron its signature lit-up appearance, refused to activate no matter what got tried through the dashboard controls. The suspicion landed on internal control modules inside the headlight housings themselves, and swapping those modules over from the original damaged headlights seemed like the logical fix. It wasn't. The lights still refused to activate, and the search for an answer kept expanding outward from the headlights themselves. The actual fix turned out to have nothing to do with the headlights at all. Buried in a separate part of the car sat a pair of rear quarter control modules. The same modules that had been unplugged months earlier during the initial cutting and disassembly work. And the same modules the team already knew controlled the brake lights. Reconnecting them solved the daytime running light problem entirely, in a way that made very little intuitive sense on paper but worked exactly as needed the moment it was tried. Why would a rear-mounted module control a front-mounted lighting function on a car this modern? The wiring logic of a hypercar this complex rarely explains itself, and this build had already stopped expecting it to. Getting there took real trial and error, rather than a lucky first guess. The modules had been sitting disconnected since the earliest stages of the project, tucked away, and mostly forgotten once the team's attention moved on to bodywork and bigger visible problems. Reconnecting them almost happened by accident, more out of a process of elimination than any confident diagnosis.
That should have come on with the key. I should have been able to press that on with the key, but it is road legal. It's road legal, but no DRLs. I think we're gonna have to change over all these modules. I just hope we don't have to split the headlights to do it. Whether we can get in through the back, I don't know.
And when the daytime running lights finally lit up on the very first try after that reconnection, the relief in the workshop was immediate and unmistakable. Sometimes the biggest fix on a build this complicated turns out to be the smallest, most overlooked wire in the entire car. One puzzle solved immediately created the next one. The car needed extremely wide rear rubber to have any realistic shot at top speed. 355 millimeters of tire width specifically. But no manufacturer currently produces a tire that wide for a 22-inch wheel, which is what the wide-body arches were originally designed around. The workaround meant keeping the original 21-inch wheel diameter, but sourcing a far more aggressive offset instead, pushing the wheel further outward inside the newly widened arches to fill the visual gap left behind. Is a compromise like that a genuine solution, or just the least bad option available on a car this far outside normal parts availability? Even that compromise came with unresolved questions by the end of the build. The wheels included with Venom's kit technically fit the new arches reasonably flush, but their stock black satin finish left the team genuinely divided. Some argued the car needed a bolder color to match a wide-body kit this aggressive. Others weren't convinced the wheels themselves were large enough to fill the arch the way the rest of the bodywork demanded. With no tires mounted yet, and the car still sitting at its lowest ride height for testing, judging the final look accurately was close to impossible. Would a problem this purely visual really be harder to settle than cutting into a genuine Bugatti quarter panel had been? For this team, at this stage, it was starting to look that way. The wheel decision, more than any fabrication challenge in this entire build, was the one problem money and metalwork alone couldn't solve. Bugatti said no, and Mat Armstrong's team built their way around every part of that refusal anyway. A gearbox cut and rebuilt by hand, a wide-body kit flown in from Dubai, real headlights secured through a source that couldn't even appear on camera. Every fix uncovered a new problem, and the last one is still sitting unsolved. What color, what wheels, what final look actually does this car justice? That decision is still open, and it might end up harder than anything Bugatti's refusal ever threw at this build. If you want to see how it gets settled, hit like, drop your take, and subscribe to my channel.